All right, everybody. Thank you for joining the Cleaning Hustle podcast. We are so excited that you're here. And I think Lexi's going to introduce our fabulous guest today.
Yes, I am. So today we are going to be talking to one of our longest employees and our national accounts manager, Scott Humphrey.
Hey, Scott.
It's great to be here.
Are you excited?
I am. I'm very excited.
Are you beyond excited?
I don't know about beyond excited, but
He dry cleaned a shirt.
is there something
for
on
this.
the other side? I did. I dry cleaned my shirt for this.
That's awesome. All right, so let's talk about your journey, and I thought about this a lot last night because I was thinking about this podcast, and I think our journey started at a breakfast, if I remember right, where we were at, or were we at lunch? No, it was Payway.
No. Actually, no. We met 2010, and I wanted to get a ride on your airplane.
That's right.
And I came out, met you out at Mesquite Airport, and went for a ride out there in the first cozy you had.
Yep.
And that was a great experience. And then I think a few years later, you and I met we ran into each other at it was a fly-in. It was another Kennard fly-in at TKI. And we got to talking, and you found out that I was in sales, and I think we maybe scheduled a breakfast a couple of weeks later,
Yeah, and that was cool. And that was kind of the season of, there was kind of a twofold thing there for us because you were getting in the season of kind of regaining, going back to church, working on kind of your relationship with God, and so it started off kind of as us just sitting around talking about how we're kind of progressing in our relationships with God and everything else. And then it kind of morphed into, I think at the time you were selling insurance.
I was.
You had left Walmart, and you were selling insurance, and then I just kind of one thing led to another, and here we are. So,
that is kind of how it happened. I'd been with Walmart for almost 19 years as an operation manager. I left, I was burnt out, went to insurance for a little while, and we talked about that, and that kind of piqued your interest that I was in sales. And I think it was about that time that I hadn't been to church since high school, and I started going back to church, and that was a super positive experience for me, and came back to God where I should have been all along.
Yeah, that was a great experience, just kind of how we all came together. And, I always look at those as opportunities because one of the things that personally I do with IFS is I always, IFS is God's company to begin with. And so first and foremost, I always say, God, you bring the people in that need to be here and get the ones out that don't need to be here. And so to me, I look at those as kind of like divine appointments of us crossing paths at the right time, and then God brought you into the company, and so here you are. How many years later now?
Gosh, I think we're at 9. I think we're at 9 years now.
Yeah,
I'm not exactly certain, but I think that's right.
Yeah. So prior to that, no janitorial experience other than stripping and waxing some Walmart floors.
I actually, my junior year of high school, I worked with a friend of mine that cleaned buildings regularly, and I worked with him for about 3 or 4 months during one summer, cleaning offices in Tyler.
Yeah.
And so that was my first experience, and then a lot of stripping and waxing floors at Walmart and other grocery companies I worked before. Too much experience doing that.
Yeah, you got to start somewhere, right?
That's true.
So when you got to this company, did you think you'd be here 9 years later?
I don't know that I had an expectation one way or the other. I think I think I prayed about it a lot and hoped that God would just put me in a place that was going to be the right place for me. And the old adage is, God puts us in a place either for a reason or for a season, and you just got to trust the process and go where He sends me. So I've had a pretty great experience for the last 9 years, and I hope there's going to be a 9 more.
Yeah, or more than that. Yeah.
For sure. So you're our second longest employee here.
Right.
What do you think are some of the, at least in the business world, what are some of the things that have kept you here this long?
Oh, goodness. I don't know. I think I think that looking around, I've had the opportunity to do different things here. There's always been a new challenge. I started out just doing sales, and then general manager, and then in operations, and then national accounts. And there's always something new to learn, something new to do. Even when I've been doing something for a pretty good stretch, it's still not so long that you kind of burn out, and that can happen. Even if you're doing something you love, you can burn out. So I've never really run into that problem. I think that's one of the biggest things. I love the challenges. I love learning new things, and this is one of those things that kind of speaks to me.
Yeah. So let's just kind of talk through your journey. A lot of the listeners that listen to this show are young entrepreneurs trying to start out in the janitorial business. And so you've kind of been involved, like you just said a minute ago, in every single aspect of the business. So let's deep dive into some of that. Let's talk about some of your best experiences, your worst experiences. Like, just talk us through your journey of what it was like to start from the beginning, and talk about some of the highlights of going to a cruise house in the middle of the night and them sticking the keys through the door. And, here you go. Here's 20 buildings. I quit.
I wish that was the only one time that happened. When I first started off, I started off in sales, and I had been doing some sales in the insurance industry, which was surprisingly easy for me. I think in insurance, I had a close ratio close to 95%. And for me, it was for insurance is really about, I don't want to close it, but I want to get the upsales on top of that. And then when I came to janitorial, and closing ratio dropped down to 45%, and that was a little that was a little concerning for me. But I still kept that desire to have the upsales on top. So I really pushed myself to do that. Well, if I'm going to get 40%, I want to get all I can out of that 40%, and we're going to add a little extra there. So that was great, but it was really, really concerning that, kind of took the wind out of my sails a little bit to have such a drop in close ratios. And I think janitorial can be a challenge, and for anybody that's entrepreneurial and they're starting to try, they're starting out in this business, you can't let yourself get down because you're not getting the sales you want, you didn't get the close rates you want, you didn't get that little extra thing you wanted. You just got to trust the process, and again, you have to tell yourself, if I'm not getting the total number of closes that I want, then it's going to be really important that I have a fatter pipeline. I just need a bigger pipeline is really all there is to it. It's a numbers game. And if you're only going to close 30% or 35%, you got to look at how many you want to close this month and make sure that you have a big enough pipeline to reach that number.
Yeah, I was actually just telling one of our sales guys, because we went around the table and we were, what did we call it, Lexi?
It's public declaration of a goal that you want to set, because we watched Simon Sinek and Dan Martell, where they tell you to say your goals out loud to people so they can hold you accountable. So we went around the table and all set a goal we wanted to be held accountable to.
Yeah, and so one of the guys said he wanted to make whatever, I think he said $200,000 a year as his personal income. And I said, pretty much what you were just saying is, take that and then figure out how many deals you need to have. Like, if you're in your pipeline and you have this many deals and you're going to close 25, 35%, whatever your normal closing is based on that salesperson, reverse engineer that, and then you can actually build out what your income's going to be just by knowing, okay, well, I've got to have 30 leads this month in order to even hit that goal, instead of waiting to the end of the year and trying to tally it up and go, oh, did I get it there? Nope, you didn't get there because you didn't map it out. So you can reverse engineer the goal.
Yeah, you're right. You may not get the closing ratio that you want. You may not get the percentage that you want. You may not get the actual dollars that you want. And you can't always control that part. But the one part that you can control is how many leads I'm going to get this month. I'm going to go out and if I need 100 leads, I'm going to go get 100 leads. And leads don't always pan out, but you can always knock on another door. You can always make one more phone call. You can always send one more email. If you that's the one thing in this process that you absolutely can control, is how many leads you're going to get this month.
Yep. So let's talk about lead generating. We do it kind of several different ways here. We use our appointment setters. That's really all we've ever used. We've used appointment setters and referrals.
Well,
and then cold calling. Yeah. Like stereo sound, cold calling.
Don't forget about but we've recently shifted that because, us on the rad side, we're not necessarily cold calling. Like on the phones, yes, if we have time, but the only people who are cold calling now are Keels and Jay in the multi-tenant realm.
Yeah. Let's talk about cold calling, though. You've had your fair share of that. So let's talk in terms of somebody's never done cold calling. They're afraid. I know there's been times where I told myself I can think of a very specific situation where I went to North Plano. I literally sat in the parking lot of a building that I wanted to cold call, and then I panicked, and I talked myself out of going into that building, and I drove away, and I didn't cold call anything that day. I was like, I'm going to go get some chicken or something. I don't want to do this
same building.
So let's talk through the mental hurdles. How do you work through the mental hurdles? How do you, what do you say when you walk in the front door?
I think it's everybody has their forte. Cold calling isn't my forte. I've done it and I've been successful at it, but it's definitely not my forte. And I think a lot of people, if they're not wired the right way, there's going to be a lot of mental pressure to not do it. And so you really have to look at, it goes back to what you want. I need those 100 leads. I need those 150 leads, whatever it is. And you're standing in front of the building. There's your lead. Just go in and get that lead. I think the other thing too, one of the really great things about cold calling, you have to think about the fact that if you're using telemarketing as lead generation, or you're depending on a website, or you're depending on social media marketing, you get what you get. Whatever shows up at your door, that's what you get, and you go work with it. When you're cold calling, you get to choose the buildings that you want. And if you need a certain amount of money, that I want a certain amount of commission. I'm going to need 10,000 square feet. I'm going to need 5 days a week. And that's that building right over there. And you choose that building and you go cold call that building. You can control, what you're looking for just by picking out your own buildings rather than waiting to see what falls in your lap. So that's one of the big pluses of cold calling. As far as I think walking into the building, I think curiosity is your best bet for connecting with people. You go inside, find out who's there, and just start asking questions. Hey, what do y'all do here? Oh, what do you do here? Oh, okay, and just curiosity is a great way to lead yourself into information and asking the right questions. But it does need to be genuine. You can't just have like a preset list of questions that you're just going to automatically spit out every time. You have to have some genuine curiosity and interest in the business. That helps quite a bit.
Yeah.
And there's no reason to be intimidated by people in terms of whoever you talk to at the front desk is probably just a gatekeeper anyway. They're not going to be the decision maker. You don't have to worry about blowing it, saying the wrong thing. They don't care anyway. They're busy.
Yeah, they're not going to remember you tomorrow.
Exactly. They're not going to remember you after lunch. I think that's really important, is just not let yourself get, wound up and caught up in the moment of, this is uncomfortable for any specific reason. Don't talk yourself out of it. I would say also that I think a lot of people, they get themselves too wound up, or they're too worried about sales, or too worried about anything. And you kind of get this desperation attitude. And I've always said that, if you get desperate, your clients are going to smell that as soon as you open the car door. They're going to know the second you walk in, and it's going to kill the vibe. It's going to kill that atmosphere of curiosity and interest. And I really want to help you guys. That's the other thing too, is I think you have to, when you go into a building, you have to have the mental attitude that, this is a great company. We're going to help these people. Most cleaning companies don't do the best job in the world, and it's always you walk in there and you see, oh my gosh, look at the cobwebs. There's some Granddaddy Longlegs up there in the corner, and there's dust on this lady's desk, and and you just kind of walk in and go, hey, I can fix that for you.
Right.
You know, and it really, it makes it a lot more comfortable knowing you're not just there to make a sale. You're not there to take something from them. You're not just asking, I have something to offer. I can make your place cleaner. I can make this, you know, more forward facing to your clients and to your employees.
Yeah. Yeah. Going back to what you said a little bit earlier, is I'm a firm believer that if you pick a building that you want, we know in our industry that the average account doesn't, you know, the contracts, you know, that we keep them 18 months on average for an industry average. That's not how we are at IFS, but you know, on industry average. So in theory, you could say, I want that 5,000 square foot building, and I can get that building within 18 months. And it used to be back in the day, like Joey used to say, you know, I'm going to be your next janitorial company. And because the reality of it is the numbers speak for themselves. Very few companies keep their janitorial services for 20 years, 25 years. You know, it's typically, if the industry average is 18 months, then, you know, no matter what, at least I'm going to get an opportunity to bid that within 18 months to 2 years. And then you just have to make sure your numbers are right and you represent yourself well.
Yeah, you know, and I think even though that's the industry standard, I think that's really telling about our industry. If you go back and look at our client list, I would say the majority of our single tenant buildings are way more than 18 months.
Oh yeah,
4,
I think
5, 6, 7. You know, our biggest client now is, I think they're on. The majority of the buildings are at 6 years, but we actually got our earliest buildings about 8 years ago from that company, and a lot of our clients are that way. But there's a significant part of our portfolio that's at a minimum 4 years old.
Yeah.
So I think that's very telling about companies. If a janitorial company is out there that you know, whether you're entrepreneurial or it's a larger company, or no matter what your situation is, I think if you fall into that 18-month average, you should probably look at your processes.
Yeah.
Something's wrong. If we can have this many buildings that are at 4, 5, 6, 7 years, then anybody can if they have their processes right.
Yeah, and we have. I mean, I could name a handful of them that have been with us 19 years plus.
Yeah.
You know, some of the ones we got in the early days, you know, they're still there. So, yeah, that's true. So, let's talk about the industry as a whole. And just think about the industry like when you first started out and where we are today. What are some of the biggest shifts that you've seen in the industry?
Oh, gosh. I think right off the bat, I think initially I saw a lot more of our competitors that I ran into when I was doing sales were the franchise type competitors. You know, Coverall and you know, Janet King, JanPro, some of those other, a lot of those other companies. And over time, we're seeing a lot more entrepreneurial local companies, smaller companies. I think a lot of people are out there building businesses, and I think a lot of the franchises have really done such a poor job on the operations side. They've just left a bad taste in people's mouth, maybe. And people are moving away from hiring franchises. I think there's a few of them that are growing. We talked about this the other day. There's a few that are really on top of it, and they're really growing well. But I think by and large, a lot of them are shrinking. And
the ones that are growing are actually the ones that have shifted their business model. They don't use the multi-tiered franchise unit. They have like a master franchise, and then they run their crews like we do.
Yeah.
The ones that do the master franchise and then they have a franchisee, these guys down here, I think that the model has to shift in order for it to go forward.
Right. I think, regardless of what industry you're in, business is always changing. And when something changes, you have to analyze what that change is. Where's it going to go in 2 years and in 5 years and 10 years? And you have to pivot. You have to go where the market's going to go. You can't force the market to go where you're going to go. So I think it's really important to have really good analysis on that. But that is one of the biggest changes. I think people are moving away from franchises and more to more local companies. Mm-hmm. I think another thing is how they're operating, maybe in terms of. We've seen a lot of subcontractors in the past that's really all they did, and maybe they didn't want to do sales, or they weren't good at sales, or they didn't clean up right, or they're afraid of whatever it is, or maybe they just weren't good at the ops side of it. So you saw a lot of subcontractors that were out there in the market for us to kind of hire and help and build them up. And we're seeing fewer and fewer subcontractors that don't do sales. A lot of them are really starting to move into that space themselves, and not just depend on working as subcontractors, but supplementing by getting their own sales and their own clients. Yeah. That's been a huge shift too.
How do you think that's going to affect the subcontracting model in the future?
I don't think subcontracting is ever going to go away. I think it's a super valid way to get business done. Even if you're doing your own sales, there are seasons throughout the year that are really tough for a lot of people. And even if your sales are down and you're not getting the new buildings you need, or maybe you lost some buildings, you still have to keep your people at work, or you're going to lose them. And a lot of times that's where we come in, and they're not so worried about whether it's their account or it's a subcontracting account or what the margin is. They know they have to keep their people working, or they're going to lose them. So I think that's one of the reasons the subcontractor model is always going to be there. It's the only model really in multi-tenant, and so it's around to stay. It's not going anywhere. It may change the way it looks a little bit, but it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's just too expensive to switch to W-2 entirely, and
well, the customers couldn't afford it for one.
Yeah.
I mean, the increase in what the monthly billing would be would go
it's outrageous.
Dramatically.
Yeah.
You know,
well,
30-40% of what their bill would be.
I think the other thing too is one of the most difficult parts of the cleaning industry is the sales aspect. Sales isn't really considered skilled labor, but it is. I mean, this is a really, really intensive skill that, it takes years and years of practice and learning and to really develop that skill, and not everybody can do that. And the same thing with operations. Operations, you have to have the right personality and the right way of thinking to kind of wrap your head around what's going on. And those are the two really biggest skilled portions of this industry. And if you don't have the right people, or you're not good at that yourself, or you can't afford to hire them, whatever the reason is, then your company is not going to be as solid as a lot of other companies in terms of growing and filling up the market space that we're in. And it's going to kind of keep you in that subcontractor model. You may break into the other model a little bit, but without those two key components, you're never going to grow in that space.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Talking, staying in kind of the industry standard / just the industry in general, what would you say is probably one of the biggest misconceptions about janitorial?
Oh, customer misconceptions are the big thing in terms of, I feel like a lot of our customers really dismiss us as being minimum labor work, unskilled labor. Anybody can do that, and it's really it's a complex process between the laborers who are actually doing the work and the operations manager that have to have all the additional know-how to solve problems. But a lot of our customers think that you're just cleaning a toilet, it's a $4 an hour job. That's a really hard misconception to get past. I think a lot of people just don't understand how difficult this can be. They don't understand that it's more than just spraying it and wiping it. There's a lot more that goes into the chemistry and the training. I think it's a lot more work than people give it credit for. And
yeah, a lot of times they'll say, "Oh, it's just cleaning,"
yeah.
But there's a lot more technical side to it than I think people understand.
Yeah, and you being in sales, you run into this a lot with a lot of people that they really want to lowball you on pricing, and I think that's the reason why is they just can't imagine somebody cleaning something can be an expensive process, but there's a lot that goes into it, and it's subject to inflation and labor market and the cost of goods, and just like everything else is, and it's continuing to grow. And I'm always surprised by the people that want me to give them pricing that's pre-COVID or even pre-1999.
1982.
And I know they want 1994 pricing, and it's just not realistic. And especially in a post-COVID world, The latest estimates are 35 to 40% increase in labor costs in this market segment. People cannot expect to have 2015 pricing anymore. It's just gone.
Yeah. Yeah. And then our competitors, they keep bidding this stuff low, and then it makes it more challenging.
Yeah, but you know what? I had a very interesting walkthrough yesterday. I had a walkthrough on an account, 3,000 square feet, 2 days a week. Our price was $600, full scope of work. And the guy tells me it's the people they're using now, very big company in Dallas, like very big. And so he told me, he's like, we're with them. And I was like, oh, that's not surprising. And he tells me they have no contract. They've never had a contract. They don't make any of their clients sign a contract. And then he goes, and I'm paying $3,000 a month for 3,000 square feet 2 times a week. And I was like,
You're like, I wish I would have adjusted
Wow.
my bid. Now, we need more like that in our marketplace.
Yeah, from the sales aspect, I try to always, when I'm talking to somebody in sales, in the sales space, I try to get out of them their budget or what they're paying now before I even mention a price. It's and a lot of people don't want to tell you that, and it's really hard to get out of a lot of them. But that's my first go-to is what are you paying now? What's your budget now? And try to get that information.
And I don't understand why that's such a secret thing. I mean, we're very fair on the way we do it.
Because she would have charged them $29.99. That's why.
She would have charged them. Yeah, we might have discounted
No,
it a
we
little
would have
bit.
been fair, but that's the way people think about it, though.
Yeah, but on the other side, we had one come through the other day that was $3,500 a month, and it was ours for the taking. And I ran the numbers as best as I could, forwards and backwards, and I was like, nope, we walk away from it. And I think that's what more companies need to do. They need to start setting that standard of, let's do like you were saying, let's do what it actually takes to do the job. Treat our people right. Treat our people with respect. Pay them what they're worth, and then get the customer to understand that. And if more people tell this customer, I'm sorry, it's not a $3,500 a month account, then they're going to end up not having service, and then they're going to end up having to come up at some point. But the reality of it is they're going to call through the Google. They're going to keep calling until somebody goes, oh, yeah, I'll do it for that. And then I was telling the sales guy, I said, how was that pricing set in the first place? They got a bid from somebody that probably didn't know what they were doing, didn't know how to do the math, was like, yeah, I'll do it for $3,500 a month. Me and my wife will clean it. And now that's become their standard, and we're trying to compete against that,
I think there's so many people in our space that, they're not pricing their buildings right themselves. And there's so many companies that'll go out there and underbid and low bid and because there's so many of them, they're kind of setting the standard for the entire industry. And when that happens, they're not doing any of us a service. They're trying to get their own sales out there by low bidding, but when everybody in the industry does that, it sets the entire industry standard too low.
Yeah,
and that's part of what's happening. I think from a customer standpoint, I also think that a lot of them think of this as a bidding industry, and they're bidding us all against each other. This isn't a bidding industry. It costs what it costs to do a good job, and we're not framing a house. We're not,
Right.
This isn't that kind of an industry, and they're always looking for the lowest bid. And I try to get my point across to the customers that this is not a bid industry. It's going to cost what it costs. So there's no reason to try and keep all that information yourself. I'm also surprised by the number of people that try to keep their cleaning problems to themselves. They have issues, and you ask them, so what's, your current company, how's the cleaning? Is it going well? Is it going bad? What are they missing on? And they're like, they don't want to tell you. Like, it's not a secret. I can help you right now.
I can walk through here and see it myself.
I can see the dust, and I know that one mop hanging in the mop closet's being used in the bathroom and the break room, so I know how it's going here, but please tell me more.
What I've seen in that situation is that the person that you're talking to or you're walking the building through or whatever was the person that chose their current janitorial company, and so they
It's
all,
some embarrassment.
yeah, they're a little bit of embarrassment. Like, well, I chose them, and now I'm getting my butt handed to me from upper management because I'm the one that made this choice for this company, and they're doing a terrible job. So it's actually a reflection of them because they made the decision to hire that company. So I've had them come in and be very apprehensive about like, hey, I almost don't want to make the decision again because this last one was such a bad experience. And so you have to reassure them like, no, we're going to make this. We're your partner. We're going to come alongside you. We're going to make this better for you. It's going to be really, really good. And then get them comfortable with you because they just had a really bad experience. And then if you go into with, hey, this is not a bid war. Let's just figure out what it takes to actually get this job done for you so we can make you look really good.
Yeah, I think that's really important. One of the other things I've seen too that's just is kind of a curiosity to me though is they'll have a crew for a long time and they hire them based on personalities and relationships, and they've had them there forever, and they know the crew and they know the people and they know their kids and they know their aunts and nieces, and they get this personal relationship, and the cleaning is bad. It's bad. And they don't want to let them go because of that personal relationship. And they don't even want to tell you when you walk in the door why they've let it go on so long. And that's one of the reasons is that long-term relationship, and they know they're going to have to do something they don't want to do.
Yeah, and that's tough. That's tough.
Yeah. Well, in the sales ops realm of things, we've talked about how you have come up in the company, but you're our national accounts manager right now. So what's unique or different about dealing with those large-scale clients?
Oh, goodness. Yeah, it's a lot different than working in operations with a lot of individual clients. There's usually a higher expectation. They're spread out. When I was an ops manager in the North Texas area, I could go and visit each location and build a relationship with that local person. And there's almost always someone on site there that I could build that relationship with, check things out, see how they're going. In the national account space, it's very, very difficult to do that. You don't always have the opportunity to build relationships with the people that you need to build the relationships. They're spread out. They're all over the place, and you get barraged from calls all over the country. But you always know that this isn't single buildings that are all unrelated. If you mess up in one, then that can mess up your reputation in all of them from coast to coast. So there's a much higher standard. There's a much higher sense of urgency. And a lot of times you have to do things that, all right, well, that's not in the scope of work, but yeah, we'll get that done, and I'll add that to the scope of work for next month. There's a lot of that. It happens, and what's good for North Carolina isn't what's good for Arizona, and vice versa. So, in some places you may have to have, even though it's the same company and they generally have the same scope of work, there may be a lot of things that you have to add or subtract to the scope to meet the price point and still make the local managers happy or local staff.
And you have different climates to deal with. You might have dry Arizona in one place and snow in North Carolina the next place, and you got different dynamics of how,
Oh, absolutely. We spend so much time cleaning window ledges and windows in West Texas and Arizona. It's maddening sometimes. And then in other places, especially North Carolina and Louisiana, you have a lot of mold and mildew there. And so the complaints are very different from coast to coast. Definitely. And you have to pivot to take care of those things. And you can't just take care of problems too. I think from the whole industry, one of the worst things that happens, and it happens all the time, it's industry standard, is wait for the complaint and then go deal with the complaint. And for me, that is the wrong way to think about it. You have to get out in front of it, way out in front of the complaints, and prevent them. You don't want to be on the backside of that trying to fix complaints. You have to prevent them.
Yeah, you don't want your customer being your quality control person.
Yeah, don't get behind the airplane.
Yeah.
So say you have someone in sales and they're wanting to get into the national account space. What kind of qualities would you say someone needs to have to be able to do?
Oh, gosh. I think it depends on the sales model. If they're a true isolated salesperson, or if they're more of an account manager. Those would be different skill sets, but definitely if you're in the sales space, you're going to have to be really really focused on a lot of leads. It's very difficult to land national accounts or multi-unit accounts. And so I think there is a much higher number of leads you're going to need than if you're working in the single tenant space. I think the close ratio is going to be a lot more lower. You're going to have to be a lot more resilient to getting a lot of no's. You're going to have to, I think also, you have to go look for the no's. A lot of people don't want no. They don't want to hear a no. That just drains their psyche to hear no's. If you're going to work in the multi-unit space, though, you're going to have to absolutely get used to no, and not only get used to it, but seek them out. Because you don't have time to waste on 100 people that are going to be no forever. If it's no, you can't let them get away with maybe. Maybe doesn't work. You got to get a yes, you got to get a no, and then move on to the next person. And you're going to have to accept a much lower, closing ratio in that space. I think for my experience with multi-unit accounts, especially with our largest multi-unit account, is that we didn't get it all at once. We built a reputation over time. Oh, look, these guys can solve problems. And you get one, and then you get another, and then you get another, and you really build that reputation and add units as quickly as you can based on your reputation. And that's more of the account manager model that I work in. And you have to have a really super high expectation of quality and your level of concern for your customer, your level of sense of urgency. That's super important. Do you have to build your reputation, and you have to build relationships to keep adding those units as they come along. Not every multi-unit account's going to come at you at every location all at once. And for many of the larger companies that are going to offer that to you, they have 30, 50, 100, 200 locations. You're not going to roll all those out at once. You don't want to have that all up in your face all at once. That can be a real challenge to roll out that many accounts all at one time, and then not walk away with egg on your face as soon as you got the ink. The ink's not even dry on the contract yet, and you're already messing up because you couldn't handle that many accounts all at one time. If you can build it out by unit or by region, that's a much better option than hoping for the big fish that's going to hit you with 500 locations all at once, and you not having the resources to make sure that they all pull off smoothly on day one.
What is I think it was, I'm trying to think of the customer we had, but I think I was trying to remember how many accounts, like what is our max we've ever rolled out in one weekend facility locations, and I could be totally wrong on this, but I think it was when we rolled out Chicago, we rolled out. The ER. The
urgency
care
place.
There was, I can't even remember how many of those locations, but we had teams all over the country rolling them out all on the same weekend.
Yeah, that was Austin area, Houston area, Chicago, Philadelphia, or was it Philly? No, it was our Baltimore had a couple. We had a whole bunch here in the North Texas area. Yeah, that was a challenging rollout. Now we with our big communications client, we did start a lot more locations at once, but we had already planned out for a remote start for months, and we had good subcontractors on the ground to kind of roll that out for us, and then we went around and checked all their work. But with the urgent care, when you're talking about, we had to have people in multiple cities and trying to roll out multiple units each person. That was a big challenge.
Yeah,
it was really, really difficult too.
Yeah, and we pulled it off though. The only reason why we even got moved out of that was because that company sold out. I mean, we had a great satisfaction level with them right out of the gate. So. Talk about one of the biggest questions that we get, at least I get, when people talk to me about national accounts or the subcontractor relationships we have, is really they'll just point blank say, how do you find good people? Like, we do a lot of rural work, like it's out there in the middle of flipping nowhere, population 500 people in the town. And one of the things that I always say is to say, well, every town, no matter how the size is, there's always a janitor in every town, so we can find one that way. But talk about some of the strategies that you've used over the years to, I mean, I know you got some unorthodox ways that we found some crews over the years. So talk about that for a minute.
So, well, way back in the day, as you know, in the 80s and 90s, it was all about the newspaper and classified ads. And
The green sheet.
And the green sheet
Craigslist.
came later, and then Craigslist came after that. And I kind of took the Craigslist idea and morphed that into using Facebook and social media to find people. And I think you don't find people so much as you put out the word that you're looking for people, and then other people will refer them. A lot of people that find us, their friends saw the ad, or their uncle saw the ad, their mother saw the ad that we put out on Facebook or some other social media, and then we'll get a call that way. And I think, like everything else, e-com and social media it's where the future is going to go, and we have to pivot with that. And that has been probably our most successful model of recruiting, is using Facebook groups, garage sale sites, and other places like that, and janitorial sites, and a few other things to kind of find those people. We do run into some situations and places in really small towns that they don't have any Facebook groups for the town or the county or anything even nearby. And a lot of times we have to resort to physically calling out churches and calling, the business next door and ask them who cleans their business. And sometimes you do have to resort to that, direct call model. But I think by and large, people are more and more communicating their needs to their communities using things like Facebook and Instagram. And I haven't tried Instagram yet. I have no reason to think that would probably not be successful as well. And you've got to get your name out there. You've got to let people know. You have to communicate to the whole community what you're looking for.
Yeah.
And we've been pretty good about doing that. As far as staffing, unfortunately, the most difficult or disheartening part of this process is many of our areas we've had to use a lot of different people to find the right one. And you're staffing a building in the middle of nowhere, or you're staffing a building, even if it's somewhere, it's far away from you. You find someone, you put them in the building, you try them out, and there's a lot of people. We usually have a 3-person interview process, and they'll get by all 3 interviews, and you put them in the building, and they're just awful. And as soon as we've already negotiated the price with the client. We already have our the amount that we can pay for the crew, and you settle everything in there, and then the crew calls you up and starts wanting to negotiate on the price. Hi, I'm in your building now. You've got to do what I want. Now I got to find somebody new is what I got to do. And with our largest client, we've now that we've had them 6, 7, 8 years, depending on the location. We have gone through a lot of crews, a lot of really rough lumps of coal out there to find the diamonds. But now we're lucky that, those diamonds have stood by our side for a lot of years and done a really great job. We've got some phenomenal people that have been with us in North Carolina now for 8 years or 7 years, and some other people in, Arizona or other places that have been with us a long time. But they may have not been our first person that we tried to.
Yeah, they might be our 10th person.
Exactly.
Over the last however many years.
I'm a little jaded. Maybe this is just me, but I'm a little jaded about the hiring process, regardless of whether it's subcontractors or W-2, or you're hiring a cleaner or you're hiring a CEO. There's a lot of people out there that are good at getting past you. You ask all the right questions. You ask all the right things. You research their social media. You look at all the angles, and they say all the right stuff, and they're still terrible. They got past you, and now you have to let them go. And so I'm a little bit jaded about the process, and I really believe that sometimes it just comes down to the trial and error.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You just got to put up with that trial and error process and embrace it.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Well, we like to do this thing at the end of all of our podcasts where we like our guests to give our audience the one singular piece of advice you'd give to someone coming into the janitorial world. They just started yesterday. They want to get to where you are right now. What is the one singular piece of advice you'd give them?
Oh gosh, one. Oh, there's so many complex things. I guess, gosh, if it was just one thing, wow. You know, I think it's just like any other entrepreneurial adventure. You just plan on a lot of hard work and putting in a lot of hours, putting your heart into it. You know, any business that you start, you know, especially when you start out, you're going to put 100 hours a week into that business. Just plan on it, sleepless nights, and you know, really committing yourself to, you know, not just success, but you're going to have to commit yourself to your failures too. You're going to have a lot of them, and there's a lot of, like I was just talking about trial and error a minute ago. You're going to have a lot of failures. You can't just commit yourself to success. Everybody talks about that. You have to commit to the failures too.
Yeah.
And
Great advice.
Yeah, I like
really
that
good.
a lot.
Yeah, that's good. Well, Scott, thanks for being a guest on the Cleaning Hustle. We appreciate it. Lots of really good nuggets and good insight. And for all of you that made it to the end, we thank you very much. And we hope you enjoyed this.
We should do a podcast call while we're on here,
What's a podcast call?
where you invite people to come be on the podcast.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Well, while we're at the end here, we are always looking for people to join our podcast. So you can always reach out to me. I kind of do all the scheduling. My email is very straightforward. It's lexi@integrityfacility.com. Email me. We can set up a time for you to be on the podcast. You don't have to be in the janitorial world at all, just in the business world.
Yep, there you go. And with that, thank you for watching the show today. We hope you all have an amazing day.